Thank you. I'm going to show some sights and sounds here. Forgive me if I'm going to stand right here. I don't know if you'll be able to see me too well. I'm told that with half of my face lit, I look sinister, and I got to be honest, I like that idea. Before I start talking about Jackie Robinson, and I'm going to have plenty to say about Jackie, I'm going to play about 3 minutes. I'm going to delight your eyes and ears with 3 minutes from Fox News. This is from 2007. In 2007, which is about a year before Reverend Jeremiah Wright would threaten to derail Barack Obama's campaign for president, Reverend Wright actually appeared on the Hannity and Colmes show. And here's just a few minutes of that exchange.
How many books, sir, I'm going to say this, whether you like it or not, I'm going to get my words in. And I'm going to tell you right now, I'm going to tell you, I think as a Christian, sir, I think as a Christian, you should not separate by race in this day and age. And that's why a lot of people are going to look at that and say, we're all supposed to be united under Christ, aren't we?
Dr. Wright, Alan Colmes. First of all, I think Barack Obama put it correctly to the Chicago Tribune when he said that he'd be puzzled that the conservatives would object or quibble with the bulk of a document, which is your church's document, that espouses profoundly conservative values of self-reliance and self-help. That's what you're talking about on your website, self-reliance and self-help for the community that your church serves. I don't see what the problem should be with that.
That comes out of the perspective of liberation theology and black liberation theology. And I keep asking him, how many books of Colmes has he read? How many books of Dwight Hopkins? How many liberation theologians does he know?
But I want to ask you about your church so the public understands. I want the public to understand where your church is coming from, because you're being accused of being a black separatist church, and thus Obama is being accused by default of being a black separatist. Can you straighten that out for us, please?
Okay, the African-centered point of view does not assume superiority, nor does it assume separatism. It assumes Africans speaking for themselves as subjects in history, not objects in history. It comes from the principles of Kawaida, the second principle being Kujichagulia, which is self-determination, us naming ourselves and not saying we are superior to anybody. We have no hierarchical arrangement. When you say an African-centered way of thinking, African-centered philosophy, African-centered theology, you're talking about one center. We're talking about something that's different, and different does not mean deficient.
Aren't there black churches?
Nor does it mean superior or inferior. The whole notion of hierarchical, one superior, well, let's be separate because we're better, that's nothing, has absolutely nothing to do with it.
Aren't there black churches all over America that say pretty much what your church says? They serve the African-American community. They say very similar things to what you say in your website.
Yes, they do.
And your church is being singled out simply because it has congregants like Barack Obama, but also has people from all walks of life, welfare recipients, Oprah Winfrey,
Correct.
as I understand it, and a whole bunch of people.
Correct, that's correct. We've been singled out ever since the Audacity of the Hope speech, ever since the Democratic Convention, ever since the book Audacity of Hope, ever since the journalists found out that Barack was one of our members. Yes, we've been singled out unfairly and singled out.
We're on a hard break, but may I suggest that we talk about the American community instead of black, the American family instead of black.
Let me suggest that you do some reading before you try to talk to me about my field. I'm not trying to talk to you about... No. Martin Luther King was from the black church. He was not from the white church. He was not from Pat Robeson, Jerry Falwell, the Christian conservatives.
I judge people by the content of their character.
Yes, and he also said that war is wrong. He also said that the president lied to take us to Vietnam.
Thank you for being with us. And when we come back, we'll bring you the results of the Spartanburg, South Carolina Republican straw poll. We'll bring you that next. Straight ahead.
All right, so in many ways, what you saw there was just good old-fashioned Fox News boilerplate. What they do is they invite an easy target from what they take to be the lunatic left and fire smug, simplistic questions at the outlandishness of their guests' beliefs. The fact that it's boilerplate, though, is part of my point in sharing it. To me, the exchange between Sean Hannity and Reverend Jeremiah Wright illustrates the frustrating ease with which the rhetoric of the civil rights movement is appropriated to serve the interests it once opposed. Hannity's example is merely one of the most obtuse and boorish. "I'm with Martin Luther King," he said with a smarmy grin. "Martin Luther King was from the black church," Wright countered. But the mere mention of the black church and black family was enough for Hannity to conclude that there must not be much to the content of Wright's character. I should add here that Alan Colmes was not much help. Fox producers left it to him to directly articulate the connection to Barack Obama's potentially separatist beliefs. As I said, we don't need to look much further to begin to map this strategy's path through our discourse on race. along with the myopic form of color blindness that often accompanies it. About 2 months ago, Arizona Attorney General Tom Horne acted to prevent the Tucson Unified School District from assigning Paulo Freire's Pedagogy of the Oppressed and teaching critical race theory, which he was careful to put in scare quotes. The classes use curriculums filled with intolerance, prejudice, and hate, he suggested, all while noting that Martin Luther King, quote, stated that he wanted his children to be judged by the content of their character and not the color of their skin. And in response to the unthinkable possibility that Sonia Sotomayor's experiences as a Puerto Rican woman might actually influence her moral reasoning, Texas Senator John Cornyn, once also a state attorney general, objected to her Supreme Court nomination by insisting that, quote, the American ideal is that justice should be colorblind. The story of this appropriation is not news. Neither Sean Hannity, nor John Cornyn, nor the state of Arizona are the first to use the words of Martin Luther King to undermine the position of those who would attend to the historical consequences of race in education and policymaking. Recently, Michael Eric Dyson and Elizabeth Lash Quinn have each written books that attempt to rescue the legacy of the civil rights movement from the grip of regressive color blindness. But recognizing their efforts has done very little to slow its proliferation in public discourse. The content of one's character became the central trope in Glenn Beck's Rally to Restore Honor in the summer of 2010. It was no coincidence that Beck spoke from a platform just one flight of stairs down from the very location in which King delivered I Have a Dream. My point here is not to defend Jeremiah Wright or liberation theology or even Sonia Sotomayor, though I will admit a soft spot for Freire and a kinship with critical race theorists. Instead, my point is that if we are to make our conversation on race productive, that one we get promised year after year after year, we must harbor a rigorous suspicion of rhetorical models that force a naive form of color blindness onto the way we measure social progress. Culture too often tells us, in my view, that the less we talk about race, the less race will matter to us, and the better off we will be. This widespread insistence, as it appears across the US cultural landscape, from the soberest arenas of policy deliberation to popular culture's most insipid demonstrations, often works to flatten the uneven terrain of identity politics, secure the interests of those who stand to benefit from inattention to race, and arrest the criticism of institutions that operate on slippery racial logics. In contemporary culture, talking about race is sometimes seen as playing a card, the race card. This, to me, is predicated on a cynical appropriation of social justice discourses that transforms the moral irrelevance of race, which is very real, into a craven trivialization of race's manifest consequences. Martin Luther King is not the only civil rights hero to whom this manner of appropriation has been applied. In 2009, the Republican Party launched a redesign of its website, GOP.com, and included a page that allowed visitors to click on photos and learn more about history's greatest Republicans. In addition to Abraham Lincoln and Frederick Douglass, Jackie Robinson was listed proudly among the GOP's heroes. Beneath a smiling photograph, GOP.com explained, quote, in 1947, Jackie Robinson became the first African American to play Major League Baseball in the United States as a first baseman for the Brooklyn Dodgers. Not only was he a great athlete, Jackie Robinson was also a great Republican. I should point out here that he's wearing his Montreal Royals cap from his minor league baseball playing days, and Montreal is in socialist Canada. In the same way that good liberals often attempt to recuperate the image of King, critics of the GOP were quick to add context, correct the record, and point out that though he might have campaigned for Nixon and Rockefeller, Jackie Robinson would not be a Republican if he were alive today. Nearly every proclaimed liberal in the blogosphere reacted swiftly. The Huffington Post, thinkprogress.org, Democratic Underground, and Deadspin each contain finger-wagging entries on the GOP's claim to Jackie Robinson. The Daily Kos called it a desecration. And there's much truth in the finger-wagging. Robinson described his attendance at the 1964 Republican Convention as providing, quote, a better understanding of how it must have felt to be a Jew in Hitler's Germany. Asked in 1968 about the Olympic protests in Mexico City, an event which provoked a furious conservative backlash, Robinson said that he would have been right out there with John Carlos and Tommy Smith, the American sprinters known for their famous black glove salute. Despite the corrections, the strategic advantages of appropriating Jackie Robinson should be obvious, especially relative to the way that the GOP would like to view itself. Robinson makes them diverse and helps them abscond with some of the civil rights symbolism of Barack Obama, the liberal incarnate. If Jackie Robinson was a Republican, then Republicans are on the right side of history. Moreover, these advantages seem to obtain regardless of the truth of Robinson, who likely would have been Obama's single biggest cheerleader, and regardless of the truth of the GOP as it is presently constituted. After all, black folks do tend to vote for Democrats. And why wouldn't they try to claim Jackie Robinson as their own? Straight up and without apology, Jackie Robinson was a political shill for Richard Nixon and Nelson Rockefeller. In fact, Robinson left his job as an executive with chock full of nuts to help Rockefeller campaign for governor in New York in 1962. In his autobiography, Robinson even recounts a tale of the day he met with John F. Kennedy, who, in 1960, attempted to pry his support from Nixon. Jackie stopped just short of claiming that Kennedy offered him a bribe and barely concealed his contempt for a man who, he claimed, refused to look him in the eye. The truth is that Jackie Robinson was quite the independent. Later, he would write letters of praise to Kennedy when the president intervened to allow black students into the University of Alabama. That both Republicans and Democrats claim Robinson's legacy is testament to the fact that, more than anything, he is a vast symbolic resource and figure of unquestioned virtue. On the 50th anniversary of Robinson's first game with the Dodgers, Major League Baseball retired Robinson's jersey number. 42 would never be worn again. Now, players have had numbers retired before, but never by the entire league. This collective genuflection was meant to place Robinson apart, not just from other players, but even from the game of baseball itself. In the middle of the fifth inning of a Mets-Dodgers game in New York, Commissioner Bud Selig claimed, quote, "No single person is bigger than the game of baseball, no one except Jackie Robinson. He remains bigger than the game." When President Bill Clinton spoke next, he insisted that, quote, "A 28-year-old rookie changed the face of baseball and the face of America forever. Jackie Robinson scored the go-ahead run that day, and we've all been trying to catch up ever since." These 2 points rehearse the most sacrosanct dimensions of Robinson's presence in our public memory, that he alone accounts for baseball's special importance, and that he stands as an irrefutable symbol of progress. More recently, Citi Field opened in New York as home to the Mets with the unveiling of the Jackie Robinson Rotunda, a museum-sized shrine to his life that stands as the stadium's expansive and very expensive foyer. Later in the summer of 2009, Robinson became only the second player to have the text on his official Hall of Fame plaque altered after enshrinement. The old plaque, seen here on the left, made no mention of integration. Jackie apparently had wanted it that way because statistics are colorblind. But Rachel Robinson, his widow, authorized the change to the new plaque, which is seen on the right, to read, quote, "Displayed tremendous courage," there it is down at the bottom, "displayed tremendous courage and poise in 1947 when he integrated the modern major leagues in the face of intense adversity." With the Jackie Robinson Rotunda standing as a monument to civic pedagogy and the Hall of Fame plaque as an ode to civic piety, Jackie Robinson operates today as the face of black civic perfection. So it stands to reason that as eagerly as the right would try to claim him, the left would try to reclaim him. Like King, Robinson is quite literally above reproach in polite conversation. But what becomes clear as both left and right rush to more faithfully construct Robinson's virtue and virtuosity is that the moves become less and less critical. Instead of gathering a more careful understanding of the historical circumstances in which Robinson found himself caught up, he becomes a pawn in a petulant contest of who can more indignantly heap scorn on the other side. Instead of illuminating the complexities of an individual who indeed have had a profound effect on public life and political culture, he is cheap symbolic currency. So, however more faithful to history Democrats might be, they get us no closer to understanding how or why the appropriation of Jackie Robinson's symbolism occurs. As a side note, the Democrats might not even be right. Jackie Robinson was a person so committed to both his Christian faith and the free market that he could have made a Tea Partier blush. In part, the problem is that we live in a culture that has very few resources for talking about race in an insightful or a politically effective manner, as I think the Sean Hannity and Reverend Wright exchange demonstrates so clearly. The question, what would Jackie Robinson say, it seems to me, abets the forces that helps to drain the public square of those very resources. But we ask it anyway, and imbue Jackie Robinson with a virtue so great that he lies beyond the reach of both left and right alike.